In this episode, we take a deeper look at SpaceShipped.
Hi, and welcome to Button Shy Deep Dive, where we talk about different games from the Button Shy catalog. I'm Ian, I'm the narrative lead at Button Shy Games.
And I'm Jason, I started Button Shy Games.
And today we're talking about SpaceShipped. SpaceShipped is a solo game that seats players in the cockpit of a galaxy-spanning trading ship. Over the course of roughly 30 minutes, players experience a variety of sci-fi events while upgrading their ship and making savvy sales to build up their wealth and gather the xenocrystals they need to win the game. Designed by Lucas Gentry and illustrated by Sara Beauvais, Marty Cobb, and Daniel Ito, SpaceShipped was published by Button Shy in 2019. As of this recording, on September 24th, 2024, SpaceShipped has an overall rank of 3,517 on BoardGameGeek, with an average rating of 7.0. So that's the core of SpaceShipped, but let's try and distill it down even further. Let's do SpaceShipped, but in 5 words.
5 words. Oh my god, I should come prepared for these things, but I feel like it's better if I don't.
I can go if you need.
Right. I'm gonna say my words.
Okay.
It's just unexpected twists in otherworldly shipping, something like that. Unexpected twists in
sci-fi shipping,
twists in like mundane jobs almost. Like that doesn't get to the space or anything, but unexpected twists in mundane space life. Space life is one word there.
Yeah, space life.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, I'm not trying to show you up, but
you're going to.
I've got it in 4 words, I think. This is, I just, for people listening at home, I just want to be clear. Typically, I turn in my work, which is writing, and Jason says to me, okay, great, now make it shorter. And so this is how I've been trained now. I'm like, okay, I have 5 words, but I'm only going to use 4. Dynamic, economic space opera.
Wow.
I felt like that really hit it,
It is good. I think, the core of SpaceShipped, to me, is, it's just like, it's like you're on the adventure. Like, you are, it's a game that has way more narrative than, you would think. You know what I mean? I just love that about it, and I feel like, that's it. You're doing these boring things. You're just shipping goods and trying to just get better and get better and get better. But all these cool things are happening around you, which sets a really cool tone for the game. Unlike most small, boring shipping games,
Yes.
It's just I just love the story of it, and to me that's key.
Oh, completely agree. And I mean, even just looking over some of the cards, it's like there's really not a ton of flavor. It's like a sentence, but that one sentence evokes so much about the world.
The shipyard workers are on strike.
Yes, exactly.
It's just that's cool,
And because things kind of keep coming up, it's like, this is like a persistent problem. Like, these shipyard workers are being terribly mistreated. And it builds up this larger world through these really lean but evocative and interesting events. And because things are kind of always changing, but you sort of come back to same themes or same experiences, it does sort of create this really strong through line in a really, clean, approachable way.
Okay.
And I do really like the sort of emphasis on mundane jobs. It's not, you're not.
Yeah, you're not saving the world here. You are trying to get 3 crystals, or
Yeah.
And just trying to get 20, whatever I can't even remember the currency, 20M,
Yeah.
mega space bucks, whatever.
Right.
But like it's like pick up and deliver, which is the
Mhm.
most boring type of game of all time, in my opinion. It's just like the whole thing is described in those 4 words. That's what we can space pick up and deliver. There we go.
Yeah. There
But pick
you
up and
go. That's
deliver
good.
is like 4 words that if they couldn't better describe the game and they couldn't worse describe the game at the same time.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
of all of that genre, it's like, all right, we're gonna get stuff, we're gonna move it around here.
Yeah.
But it's awesome when there's like other cool things going around, like space winds and space pirates and
Yeah.
all these things just kind of nipping at you or helping you out more.
There's a sense that you are not a pawn, but that you are like there's this whole other world,
Yeah,
and you're sort of at its whims.
yeah,
In a way that's not like it doesn't feel negative. It's just like I'm just trying to get by in this
yeah. And
world.
that's one of the things is it sort of is a world that is on autopilot where it's just happening and you're just navigating that, which is awesome. I love that. It's that's pretty unique and different and a positive for some people and a negative for other people.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Lucas Gentry, the designer of SpaceShipped. What inspired me to make this game? Well, in 2018, there was an online party called Gen Can't, and part of that online party was this 18-card design contest put on by Button Shy. I submitted the game, and I didn't win. Ultimately, Tussie Mussy and Seasons of Rice were the winners of that game, but sometime later, I received an email that says, "So you didn't win, but can we publish your game anyway?" And I said, of course. And so that contest brought that game out. Thematically, the inspiration is just because I really like sci-fi, but also, way back in the day, 25 years ago or so, I used to play a lot of this game called Space Trader, and it was on the Palm OS operating system, and there was a lot of similarities between Space Trader and SpaceShipped. I don't think I was consciously thinking about Space Trader when I was designing SpaceShipped, but there's a lot of similarities. And then mechanically, a lot of it was just flipping some cards on the table and seeing what happened. The beginnings of SpaceShipped was just flipping cards and imagining things there. So that movement, the movement of the cards, that has been there since before the theme.
So one of the questions I have, as we're talking about SpaceShipped, is actually kind of related to that. Because it is a game where you are sort of at the whims of the world. And something that comes up, I've seen it, we talk about it on Discord, it seems to come up, is there's a specific combination of cards where you can immediately lose the game. Right from jump. You'll just be totally out of it. And the sort of running joke is that this always comes up on someone's first playthrough. Even though it has like a 1 in a million chance, but it always seems to come up on somebody's first
Not a million,
playthrough.
but yes, it's a very rare chance.
They sit down, they play the game for the first time, and they're just out.
And we know of every single one of those because that doesn't happen, and then they don't come online and tell us that it didn't that it happened. Like,
of course,
it happens, and we know instantly.
Yeah. And I have a lot of thoughts about that, but the question I have is, from the Button Shy perspective, how do you deal with something like that? I mean, it's rare, it is potentially game-breaking, it can be a really negative experience, so how do you, as the publisher, handle something like that?
So it's interesting because when this came out, we didn't have nearly the development team or process that we have today. So it was very much like Lucas made the game, we played it, we loved it, we published it. We printed it. I mean, publishing involves development. We printed it. You know what I mean? So it's like
Right.
we did not have the efforts that we have today. There was a couple things we went back and forth on, but a lot of it for me back then was like product level. Like I think it would be better, if we kind of come at it from this angle or whatever it is, or we move these things around. But from development side, our development was very light. Our testing group was pretty light back then. So today we'd probably develop that out. I don't think we would ship something today where, a 1 in 100, whatever, chance your first game you automatically lose. In this one, I think it's just a simple shifting of a number or two where you have 3 cards out, and if you can lose 3 life over the course of 3 cards, or 3 credits over the course of 3 cards, or 3 shields, or whatever it is that causes you to lose, we would just make sure that whatever you start with is above the maximum potential of those 3 cards.
Sure.
So look at all the combinations of cards and just say no card can go above 1 or 2 or whatever. Multiply that by 3. Make sure that you can't lose the game from the start. But now that it's out and that's happened, there's a couple things you can do. You could fix it, but we're not going to. And the reason we're not going to is because I think it creates interesting moments. And there's game balance, there's product balance, there's customer service issues all abound through all this. But I think you see this bad thing happens, this bad thing happens, this bad thing happens. Oh man, I lost. And then come online and talk about it, and I think it creates really interesting conversations. Like, well, that can happen in real life. A lot of bad stuff can go wrong. That can happen in this story. A lot of bad stuff can go wrong. It's likely never going to happen to you again. It's your first time and that stinks, but it's likely never going to happen again. So it's a moment. All you got to do, my suggestion is always just reorder your 3 cards. Like, don't eat, and you got to catch somebody at the moment, not an hour later after they commented. Yeah. But like, just rearrange your 3 cards and play again. It's a bust, but it has story. To me, it's the story. To me, it's the sort of like the meta of the game, where like you come online and talk about it, and it's like, here's what happened. It's like, yeah, that happens to a bunch of us. It stinks. If that sets you off for the game forever, I don't think it's the right game for you. I think first of all, it's such a short setup and everything else, but I think seeing that happen, reading why, and then the explanation on our end is like, it's not going to happen again. It's very rare to happen again. If it does, it's hilarious.
Right.
But like, me saying that and someone feeling that aren't the same. True. So, but you say, how does the publisher come at it? This game is as close to like a story narrative based, not role-playing game is the wrong word, but like a lot of people use like video game role-playing game for this, like just that video game style role-playing game where you're just kind of seeing the actions of things around you. There's NPCs and all that. To me, that's half of it. So, losing on turn 1 is just like a funny like side effect of all of that. So I hope people take it, lightly, as the game is pretty light in tone and all that stuff. It's light in setup. It's light in time investment. It's light in price. All that stuff. Error on our end. Try to turn it into a positive and just kind of roll with it and have fun. What do you think, though? You said you've
thoughts. Well, I mean, I couldn't agree more. For me, that's part of the charm of the game, is that you really are sort of like, it's a struggle. And, I've had things go right on that first turn, and I'm still out by the second. It's not like... It can happen on turn 2. It can happen on turn 2. It can happen on turn 3. There's rarely a point when I play SpaceShipped that I feel 100% safe. Now, maybe that's part of that is my skill level. But part of it, that is the joy of the game to me, is that I never feel totally safe. I never feel comfortable. I always feel like I'm rushing to try and, make some progress. And the more you play, I mean, there's a really deep, I think, skill level to this game.
Sure.
and there's layers of strategy that I'm still uncovering every time I come back to it. And I think all of that contributes to the feeling of like, this is just a dangerous game. It's not, it's not necessarily, it's not fun to lose on the first turn, but it is funny. To me,
I think it's fun that happened. Before, like in the past, that's fun that happened.
Yes,
that was a thing. It's like, but I think this is the closest we have to like what I would consider like a 0-player game. So a 0-player game is a game that you kind of run it. It plays itself. A bunch of stuff happens, and the entertainment of what that could be is just watching things unfold. And half of this game is watching those things unfold, prepping for them to unfold next time, selling stuff and buying stuff in the meantime. But I think it is as close as it gets to like a 0-player game for us, which is a concept that I love and adore. And it's just, let me throw out the cards, follow the story, see what happens. And I do think that's part of it. I think it's very much watching the story and bouncing off of it.
Yeah, I disagree. I think, like I said, I think there's layers of skill.
You think we have closer to a 0-player game?
No, that I don't.
No.
But
there's definitely layers of skill.
I think that it's part of the appeal is that depth that's there.
I think it's just this part right here, just the bam, bam, the orbital encounter and the planet side encounter. If there was a game of just those, and I just watched them and watched my score go up and down, I would be all in. But it's just, it's just part of it. It's not the whole, and that's what makes it not a 0-player game.
Yeah, and again, it's that sort of like you don't always feel like you have a ton of agency.
Yeah.
I like the bit that I have, and I like that there is room to, take a really bad run and turn it around. Just as easily as you can have a great run and it just completely falls apart.
Exactly.
That sort of variability to me is so key. I wouldn't go so far as to say I would play it without some agency, but
yeah, I'm pretty unique in wanting that out of a game. But,
that's a narrow market for zero player games.
Just make it for myself.
You're the one person.
I know the story. Like, how is someone else to make it? It's like writing a book for you to read.
Which is, that's like a reasonable reason to write a book or even make a game. One of the things that I say a lot is like, make the art that you want to make, that you want to see.
I agree with that. And I think this was the art that Lucas wanted.
Yeah.
Like 100%.
Yeah.
Like this comes from him. It feels like him, and I think he put everything into that.
Yeah. It shows.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a fun design, and I think it's a sneaky popular one.
Hi, I'm Sara Beauvais, and I painted the planets for SpaceShipped. When I was a kid, I loved to paint and I loved to play board games, especially well-illustrated games like Sarah Ponsonby's The Garden Game and Made for Trade, which was illustrated by Elizabeth Lotta. I went to School of the Arts for high school, and then I studied painting at Connecticut College. After that, I studied illustration at the Art Institute of Boston. When I was in college, I met Chip Beauvais, who is now my husband, and when we were dating, we played Magic the Gathering. I did an internship with one of the Magic artists, Rebecca Gay, and Chip started designing games for Button Shy. Chip introduced me to Jason Tagmire. I showed Jason my artwork on my website, thefairycircle.com, and Jason decided to hire me to make illustrations for Button Shy. I've really been enjoying making game art. Thanks for learning something about me today. Bye.
It has had this sort of healthy level of success. We've even seen now Fantasy Form coming out as like the sort of spiritual sequel or successor.
Yep.
But one of the things that's really interesting to me is that SpaceShipped was not originally crowdfunded. A lot of games, and especially a lot of solo games now, are getting these sort of big crowdfunding launches. I guess sort of a two-part question is, like, do you think that was the right decision not to crowdfund it? And then sort of the second follow-up is, like, how do you account for the success that it's had?
So, the first thing is it's number 11 on our BGG rank when I sort by button shy titles, top to bottom. So it's just outside of our top 10 games, which is big. We have had over 100 games. Full wild expansion games are in that, like Agropolis and things like that are on that list as well. So it's made its way to number 11 without crowdfunding, and maybe the only one that wasn't crowdfunded. I have my list right here. I'm going to just make sure of that. I'll just read it so people know. It's pretty interesting. Sprawlopolis, Skulls of Sedlick, Circle of Wagons, Agropolis, Tussy Mussy, Food Chain Island, Rove, Naturopolis, Unsurmountable Death Valley, Ugly Griffin Inn, SpaceShipped. So, yeah, the only one that wasn't crowdfunded initially. First part of your question was, do I feel that was right, or was it the second one?
Do you feel that was the right call? Would you do it differently now?
So, do I feel like it's the right call? Yes. I don't remember at the time what was released and where it was around, but we weren't kickstarting a lot of new games to people. We were looking at games that were part of a series. We were looking at games that had something previous. For example, Circle of Wagons to Sprawlopolis. They had a little bit of a connection already as the ones we were kickstarting, because we weren't kickstarting as often back then. We decided we were going to go from once a month to like 4 or 5 or 6 times a year, and then release 5 or 6 games outside of Kickstarter. SpaceShipped being solo only, this was 2019, I believe. Mm-hmm. It was not risky, but it was not nearly as easy as it is today. So we had done solo only Pennycourt, Twin Stars, all that over time, and solo only did well for us. But I think we just really wanted to let this one build because it was different. It had a lot of stuff going on in the cards, had a lot of, things in the rules. It had, it was a surprise to everybody because, like I said, I don't think it went through our heavy playtesting groups or anything like that. So it wasn't something where everyone knew about it. So it was really starting from nothing. And those are the hardest games for us to kickstart. Even today, the best ones are part of the series or from a designer we worked with before, or anything that just gives it some connection to previous backers to back this one. You can't really update an old campaign and say, check out SpaceShipped, because it has nothing in common to those old campaigns. And that's a really strong starting move to get people to follow the campaign, or back then was pre-following, just to back it essentially. So we took this little grassroots approach, released it through our club, released expansions, 4 expansions, supposed to come out over the course of a year, and that didn't happen. But it happened over time, just to support it and to drive it. It came back in reprint campaigns and popped its way to number 11 on BGG. So, yes, I think it worked out well. And I think it being a solo game that's a little more complex, it's not a lot more complex, but just has a lot going on, and isn't the right game for every solo player. It has a very specific audience. I think that was what made it work well. Was it hit those people? Those people loved it, and it just sort of just built up word of mouth from there. And would I do it the same now? Solo's quite different now. Solo only really does well on Kickstarter. But we're still sort of doing that same thing. We're being careful about new games on Kickstarter where nobody has any frame of reference. We're going to do Glass Garden this year, and that's from Roshni Patel, who we've worked with. So it's not necessarily all new to our audience. But I believe it's her first full game being released. I'm not sure.
I believe so.
And we are going to crowdfund that. We're going to kickstart it. And it's funny. The reason is because we haven't done that in a long time, where it's a game where it's all new to everybody. And I think that little bit of bounce the other way is like we've gone so far in one direction, we need to go back, to the other a little bit. So would SpaceShipped make that cut as the game that bounces the other side? And I'm going to say no, because of our Simply Solo line. And we have so much solo now that, it would be hard. But we're trying to crowdfund almost everything nowadays. So by default, it probably would eventually. But at the time, I think it was the right move.
Yeah. Well, and
it paid off in the end because it has a great successful following. When we brought it back for reprints, there was enough people that really wanted it to support that and then drive those sales. Because sometimes you bring something back for a reprint and it's like 200 people that want it, and you've got 1,000 to work with, and it kind of sells slow or whatever. But when you bring something back that everybody's wanting, that first 1,000 can move and sort of, help the next 1,000 and everything like that.
Right. It kind of creates that buzz of like, oh, finally we can get this again.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of we all own it, where's the expansions? It's like, oh, yes. And, there is a little bit of that like supply and demand thing going on.
Just like in the game.
Yeah. I also wonder too, to me it feels like SpaceShipped hit in 2019, and then solo gaming, I think, really took off in 2020 with the start of lockdowns. And I have to think part of SpaceShipped's appeal was that it was a very good solo game that was kind of around, end of 2019 into 2020.
It was there when people needed it, I think.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, it's like the perfect time to like, I already had this. Let me try it. And, I'll finally sit down and learn this game. And I think it shines so well when people are able to give it a chance, because I think, as you say, it's not a niche audience, but it is a little bit more specific.
The theme is the best word I could come for. It's, you need to like science fiction, fantasy, whatever. You need to like that little bit of whimsical, adventure where things are just kind of happening. You need to like Pick Up and Deliver and, any sort of, whatever, that kind of game. And I think you need to be kind of up for the whole like multi-use card thing is a little bit of a specific kind of gamer where you're sort of ignoring some things and focusing on others, and you need to just be way into it to let those things just kind of disappear. And some people get hung up on just not being able to cancel out the noise, essentially. So I think you have to have all those things, and there's a very specific set of solo players that is like the game for, like just hitting four notes that they love. It's really interesting to hit that crowd right where they want it to be.
My name is Laszlo Korossy, and today I get to talk about one of my absolute favorite games, SpaceShipped. There are not a lot of games that make me feel lucky just to live in a world where I get to play them, but SpaceShipped is on that list. I don't think I can speak about it meaningfully without talking first about the game that introduced me to the idea of portable gaming, which was Space Trader for the Palm Pilot 25 years ago. And the Palm Pilot kind of blew my mind because it was like a reference library of charts and maps and books, all with me wherever I was going, whenever I needed them, whenever I wanted them. But not just that stuff, but also games. And Space Trader was a fully fledged game experience. It was like a sandbox universe I could just step into at any time and play and hang out in and explore without needing to, save the galaxy or anything else. I could just have fun with it, and then once I was done, press the power button, put it back in my pocket, and it was gone until I needed it again. That stayed with me, and I rediscovered that feeling 20 years later with SpaceShipped by Lucas Gentry, published by Button Shy.
Something that I think is really interesting is, we talk a lot about sort of, I guess, modern design rules for Button Shy, things that you look for or actively try and avoid. And SpaceShipped is a game that feels like it sort of butts up against those. There's a lot going on. The multi-use cards, the different tracking, you're moving stuff around a lot. It feels like it has way more complex mechanics and more complex layout than a lot of Button Shy games, and certainly than I think almost all of those that you named in the top 11. I mean, it feels like it has the most going on, not in a bad way. There's just a lot.
It does.
And
sure.
I was kind of curious, when you were originally, printing it, as you say, was there any thought of like, can we simplify this? Can we strip it down? Or is that complexity maybe more part of the charm?
So it really was it was a nightmare to do like graphic design and like any sort of editing on it, because there's so many things that make up a card.
Yeah.
You've got the one side, which I'll just share them as I talk, but the simplest part of all of it is the three encounters, but it's essentially three cards in one.
Right.
You've got the orbital encounter, which is, an effect and flavor. You've got the planet-side encounter, which is like an effect and flavor, or flavor then the effect. And then you've got the market. And even the market, and you ignore any one of these at any time. But that was, the easiest part of the design. Here, where you've got upside-down information, different resources. In the upside-down information, there's multiple varieties of these. There's the characters that you can get. There's the upgrades. There's just so much going on. So I think to go back, and if I was going to edit or eliminate whatever, first thing I would probably do is just make it more cards. It wouldn't be an 18-card game. If I was like making this the most,
if you had free reign.
If I had free reign and was trying to just make this the most perfect, elegant, simplified version of what it is, I think you just not need certain things on every card, but you lose that whole wave of how the cards move around, which is such an appeal to the whole product. Is flip this over, rotate it, move it to its back side. Everything kind of moves in this great like ecosystem of card assets.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I do know that it was very difficult. Lucas had a spreadsheet, like basically the first game. The first versions that I had, there were prototypes, but we worked off this spreadsheet that was like every card in a million rows and columns, and rows would be each part of the card. And then some cards didn't have these parts, but they'd be in the same row, and I messed up everything trying to like make them into cards from that spreadsheet. Like your head would spin, and I was like, I don't know how he like did this. It's incredible. But it was super difficult, and I think it all works in the end. It works with that ecosystem of moving cards around. It works. It does the job that it needs to.
Yeah.
I don't know. The only things that I think I might simplify, I know what I would change 100%, which is just credits going below 0. They go into the negative, but there's no real like thematic reason for it. And all we had to do was just change the number and bump your start up a little higher and just have 0 be the bottom threshold. It did go into the expansion for debt. Debts and damages is about going into the debt, but maybe in that one we would have introduced a new card or something to allow you to go into debt. I would have changed that, but I do think it flows nicely. I think visually it works well enough. We had to use 3 different artists for it, which is because it had so many different parts.
Yeah.
And someone who's really good at drawing planets might not be really good at drawing characters, might not be really good at drawing ships. So it was complex in every way possible. And I think it's just a miracle that it all works the way it does.
Yeah.
And I
It
don't
works
know what I
well.
would do today.
Yeah.
I really don't know how we would kick it back and change it, because we just did fantasy form, which is essentially this and a few more things going
Yeah,
on.
exactly. Yeah.
So it's like, obviously we didn't change anything,
Right.
So yeah,
I guess
I
that's a
don't
good
think we could
point.
do much, but I think Lucas built something really special and did manage to pull all that off at once.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for, I guess like we talked about, the more modern design rules, which is basically no upside down text and, keep cards as straightforward as possible.
Yeah, you can't do this with
Like
that.
this breaks it, but it breaks it in the right way.
Yeah.
It is part of the appeal is that, you see everything. The phrase I often use, or the word I often use, is churn. Churn to me is just the act of moving stuff around in a game.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, even that's a bad thing, and this does it in a way that's rewarding.
good
Like
way.
you're revealing stuff. It's setting. It's not like you are doing it just to randomize or whatever. It's like you reveal the back of a card, and it's like, oh, I can get this now.
Yeah.
Oh, this is available to me. Oh man, I can't get that anymore. It flipped over. So it is. I mean, that's even part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
I think it hits all those things. We don't want a lot of moving things around. You don't want random shuffling in the middle of the game. You don't want upside down text. You don't want cards where you have to ignore half of it. And we get a lot of submissions that do all of that, and a lot of them are instant no. It's like that card has more upside down than upright, and we're just not even going to look any further because I know how hard to sell that is.
Yeah.
And SpaceShipped is just the one that broke the rule. It's the exception to the rule. It does everything wrong and somehow does it right.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's
it's interesting.
It's a great example, and it is sort of like, well, if you have SpaceShipped, you don't necessarily need. You don't want to go back to that well. You don't need a second game. I mean, obviously fantasy form, but I'm not really counting that.
Yeah.
But you don't need a new different game that breaks all the rules. It's like this one did it perfect.
Yeah.
And there is so much to the limited nature, to the amount that's packed onto a card, to the decisions that you make about what you take, into your cargo hold that changes the trajectory of your game in these really cool, subtle ways. I can't imagine doing this game any differently.
Yeah.
But it also does feel like, wow, that's, how did you do it? How did you break every rule and still make, a really cool, incredible game? And I don't know. And
it wasn't like those were rules at the time that anyone knew either. Like they emerged from SpaceShipped. Like SpaceShipped is part of the reason we've created some of those rules.
Sure.
But yeah, it's interesting because someone could say, let me try to break all the rules and make a really good game. Yeah. But this happened before the rules were ever spoken out loud.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and intentionally breaking the rules isn't necessarily SpaceShipped makes sense.
No, people will try. Yeah.
It's the right game for it. There's something that I know you've said that I really appreciate is this idea of let a game be what it is. And SpaceShipped is what it is.
It is.
I couldn't imagine how to do it differently and still keep it so cool and so, sort of weird and wild and wonderful.
It is. And it's very unique in that, too. It's just like you're just moving things around in this interesting way. Not a lot of games, I don't know. It does. Wild, wonderful, unique.
I'm Wes Urschel, and I'm a big fan of SpaceShipped. I think what drew me to the game originally was the sheer depth and complexity of it. I was fairly new to Button Shy at the time, and fairly new to solo gaming, and the description sounded like this would be right up my alley. So I got it to the table, and after my first game was completely floored by just how much fun I'd had. It took the feel of a much larger game and distilled it down to sort of its bare essence, but didn't seem to lose anything. Each card is used in so many different ways that every game is this massive new story with lots of variety, and throws up a new challenge each time. I think that's what keeps me coming back to it, and why it's one of my favorite games in Button Shy.
So we've talked a lot about the sort of history of SpaceShipped. Let's dig into a story that you have about SpaceShipped. Could be from production, could be from, since it's been released.
So there's a couple different ways you go. I don't know that there's so one of them is just the whole xenocrystals are not a resource thing. And
oof.
Yeah. This is people who are on Discord have probably seen this or even said this. But the biggest question in the game, basically, you can move resources, you can there's a card that says you gain a resource, whatever, and it's like the whole game's about gaining xenocrystals, so are they a resource? For those couple awesome moves that you can make where you get a free resource, can I take a free xenocrystal? The answer is xenocrystals are not a resource. And it came up when this game came out and ever since so often. So somebody come on Discord and go, I'm just playing SpaceShipped for the first time, I have a question. And we would just reply, xenocrystals are not a resource before they could even ask the question.
Yep.
And it usually was the right answer. So at one point we made a button that said not a resource. It was just a picture of a xenocrystal. At one point we were going to make a shirt of it. Which would have been the most in-joke shirt of all time. I still think we should make that shirt because it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you should.
And I think, I'm not sure if we addressed that in later rules. I think we had to, because it hasn't come up in a while. But it was, again, that meta that this game formed that not all games have that. It takes community and a little bit of magic and some kind of moment to create these metas where, I lost in the first turn, our xenocrystal is a resource. All that stuff that just feels appropriate for the game and the community and everything. So I think we fixed it in the rules, but I probably was maybe we shouldn't fix it just so people come ask because it's great. This is a fault of mine, a fault of our company's, and it's no longer a thing because it's a fault. But I love to release something, not that's not complete, but that's not as complete as people would want it to be. And I say that we would release a game like Chainmail. Chainmail was a year-long postcard game that we made that came out in our club and had rough rules. And the rules were rough because those games didn't have editors. They just, they were low budget and late always. So we never had an editor on it. But people would come and discuss the rules and come and discuss the game, and we would have these incredible conversations one-on-one, which I love having a one-on-one conversation with a customer, answering their questions, and just kind of getting to the bottom of it. With that person, with everybody else publicly seeing it as well, learning from it. And it made those games really special to me in that we all kind of talked our way through it. I helped everybody through their games of Chainmail. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of people hate that. I think it's a very modern thing where you couldn't have done that back in the day. You would ask a question and wait 2 weeks for an answer, an email back, or whatever it was. If you even knew. Or go on Board Game Geek and post it and all.
Yeah.
So we were able to kind of have these live conversations as the product came out. And we won't do that, often in the future. We won't do it at all because I do think it's messy and there's harm in it, and it's just you're not giving people their money's worth if you're making them do this extra work. But I think when we did that extra work, it was really special. And and I think felt what I like about Button Shy, which is just that there's nobody ever between us and the customer.
Yeah.
With very rare exceptions. If you're buying from us. If you're asking questions, you're asking questions to us. And I love that. And that not a resource thing was breaking my heart, not even breaking my rules, breaking my heart, that we have to explain that and then never have that conversation come up again, because those conversations are so important to me.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's silly and, it's sort of selfish too, I would say. It's like, to me, I like that, but you might not like that. But I do think a lot of people did like that in what it started and what it created. And, it's
yeah. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and it's a tricky balance. Overall, I would say the games that you're releasing now are so much more polished than even the ones like 2 years ago. It's
a lot changed
with each step. It just feels more and more polished, and that makes those games that have rough edges feel much more. When everything has a rough edge, that's part of the job,
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, we have 10 super highly polished things, and then these two are kind of rough. It creates that different.
It's a divide in your audience because the audience expects one thing, for sure. But I was thinking we could always do something like that. City of Six Moons. Have you seen that game?
Oh man, I want a copy so bad. I have not picked it up yet.
I did order it. But yeah, that's like my dream. Like we just don't even give you rules. Figure them out. We did a game we did once called Trolling for Trouble, which was a tiny little. Maybe we'll get to it on here one day or not. It's a weird ball game that we did.
I'd love to talk about it. I have so many questions.
But I will repeat this if we do, because more people will hear this episode than that one.
Yes.
But Mike Mullins came up with a rule in that game, and it's very much there's one player that's the bad. It's a one versus many. No, it's not even a one versus many. It's a one person kind of like runs the round. Mm-hmm. So they are like the controller of the round and kind of split people into groups, and then they all kind of go at it in this like social, somewhat deduction-y game. Not really. Social game. But anyway, if there was ever a issue or a question about the card or an effect or the resolution or anything, that main player that was running the round is up to them to rule on it.
Yeah.
And it was my favorite rule in any game we ever had, where if there's a question, this player gets to just decide the answer.
Yeah.
It's like when Mike came up with that, it was perfect for that game because that person's running around. It was very much in the line of it. But I was like, how can we do that in every game?
Right.
How can we lean into that? So it's just like, if ever there's a question, this person answers it. I love those funky offshoots of questionably, I've already said it. I want SpaceShipped to run itself. I want a game where if there's rule questions, you come up with the answers. Like, I just want these funky, weird things that nobody's going to even call a game. Board Game Geek isn't going to accept it when I submit it as a game. They're going to say, this is an activity, and I'm going to say, nope. I call it a game and I made it up, so whatever. But right. I would love to like explore those things in a big way, where the customer is in on it. Like, they're not being surprised because they bought a product and it's like, oh, I got all this stuff and I'm mad, and then maybe we can turn it into a positive when we all kind of discuss it together. I want the one that's intended to, we have to discuss it, and the positive is part of the pitch.
Yeah.
I think at one point we talked about that, where we had a game where there were no rules, but you had to ask questions on Discord, and I would give you an answer, and everyone else can see that answer as well, and that would eventually give you the rules.
That's hilarious.
That's very pre-2020 Button Shy.
Yeah, that really sums it up. It's just a change. There has to be a change as your audience gets bigger.
I'm Matt Upton. I'm known as Mad Matt on the Button Shy Discord server. I'm a big fan of SpaceShipped by Lucas Gentry. I was actually in the middle of starting to try and design a game myself, which was based on a Palm Pilot computer game called Space Trader. And I really loved that game on the Palm Pilot, and I wanted to kind of replicate it in a board game fashion. And so when SpaceShipped came across my radar, it looked exactly like, or it felt exactly like that sort of game where you have to trade resources, buy resources at one price and sell them for more to build up your money and build and upgrade your ship and hire crew and all of those sorts of things. And it really captures that adventure of flying your spaceship through space, building up your wealth, upgrading your ship, trying to dodge the baddies and the pirates and those sorts of things. With the advent of the xenocrystals, that really helped give some agency to the game. And so I was really pleased, and I'm not a board game designer, so I shelved my own design for a game of this kind of type, because this SpaceShipped fills that space really nicely for me. And subsequently I've got to know Luke really well and call him a friend of mine, and so definitely it's a great game, one I really enjoy playing.
As you're working with, I mean, incredible designers who can produce these incredibly great, beautiful, polished games, there is sort of an obligation to okay, well, let's get everything to that level of polish.
Exactly.
And I think
it's hard now to do the more experimental stuff.
Yeah.
At any level, even if we just did it just directly to patrons and all. So we have over 1,000 patrons that, it's very hard to find a spot for experimental stuff. ShyCon, that's our one experimental avenue right now.
Yeah. Well, and
ShyCon games.
You do kind of find these ways to keep pushing it, I don't know that Button Shy will ever be 100% polished. There's
you're on the inside, better than anyone. It won't be.
Yeah, exactly. I know how things are done.
You have seen.
But I think that is part of the charm for sure.
Yeah.
It's certainly one of the things that drew me to Button Shy, is the sense of these guys are just doing wild stuff that you're not seeing. I see the same thing in the indie RPG scene.
I adore the indie RPG scene.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing, and people are doing this just completely bonkers, off the wall stuff, and I love it. Even if it doesn't appeal to me personally, I love that people are empowered to just make these incredibly rough, weird, niche, bizarre games. I love that, and in a lot of these, they have a similar rule of we've done our best to explain how things are going to go, but if you have a question, make a decision. You are in charge of your fun, and I do like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that make the games that are for you, or whatever. Make the art that's for you. And early Button Shy, I was mad because I couldn't subscribe to what we were making, because it was exactly what I wanted to exist. I was I want a monthly package where I don't know what's in there. When I get it, it's just all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's never going to be the same, and it's just this wild mess of chaotic creativity, which is a pretty good description of the early days of Button Shy.
Yeah,
and I was just I don't get to subscribe to this. It's kind of bummer.
You have to spend all your time making it.
Yeah, I'm the one who knows all the secrets, and I want the other side. And for a while, I looked for it, and it just didn't exist. But indie role playing is exactly that.
Yeah,
it hits all those notes.
Yeah. Well, and there's just the culture has changed so much. There's so many more reviews than there ever were before.
Yes.
Kickstarter, you have to explain everything about the game. There's just fewer surprises, fewer rough edges overall.
Yep.
And again, that's part of why I like the indie RPG scene, because it's it exists on social media and itch.io. And that's, most of them aren't Kickstarters. Most of them aren't doing, It's just kind of like, I made this game yesterday. Here you go.
And as Kickstarter grew, stuff like that became less and less. But as itch grows, it feels like it's getting more and more of that.
It does. Yeah.
That's the cool part.
Yeah, it does. It feels like it gets weirder every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is super, super cool. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and I don't envy you as a publisher having to make those
I can't complain
choices.
that we have a great team with great games coming out, and the ones with bad rules are a thing of the past.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to complain about. Like, we are making such great products right now that it's hard to look back. It is.
Yeah. It does seem like now things are just being done to a completely different level of polish, and having a big team in place that can help with that is certainly part of it.
Was it? I think it was. Was it you that said? Maybe it was Jay Yeats. Definitely one of 3 people that said Button Shy was punk, and now we're in our post-punk era.
Oh, I don't know if I would have said that, but I definitely.
I think it was Jay Yeats. But, like, it's 100% accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's exactly it. It's
and it like saddens me a little bit, but I'm also like, oh, that's kind of cool still.
Yeah,
we're not in our like pop era.
Yeah, it's a fun thing, and like I don't think it lessens what Button Shy is. It is just a change in focus and a change in style, and being able to because some of these games are still kind of weird. Like you mentioned, Glass Garden, which is this really, beautiful game, clever. I think is going to be a really excellent addition to the catalog. But it's about terrariums. It has this like kind of, Button Shy's take on things is always so just that slightly off kilter angle from what I see in a lot of the rest of the game industry.
It's definitely a concern as we like sign new games to not lean too far into the things that are popular, but also the things that could be popular. Like a nice cuppa is a game about tea, and it's like somebody commented that 10 years ago they would have like laughed off that game. They would have the theme it would have never made it 10 years ago. And nowadays, like it's a couple years ago I said I don't want any real world themes. I don't want like stuck in traffic the game. Mm-hmm. And making tea is not that far from stuck in traffic the game.
Yes.
So like things have shifted on our end and in the industry to make that even possible. But yeah, there's a concern to make sure we don't have too many like of what you'd expect themes and things like that. And we have a couple coming out that are completely unexpected, especially the ones that are based on like real holidays and stuff like that. Those ones are going to kind of come out of left field, I think. I think it's important to be our own and not just, I don't know, I was going to say bird games are popular or whatever, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we're never looking for that. We're looking for good games that are interesting. Although the little trend on rock and roll games has it's kind of hit a sore spot for me where I've got a couple ideas for that, but it's a tough one. Yeah. Well, it's like that's the kind of thing where it's creating opportunity as opposed to like, oh, we need to be on that trend. It's like, no, that was a kiss of death for so many years.
Yes.
So it's pretty cool that that's a thing now.
If there was one thing that I could change about SpaceShipped, what would it be? So that is a very easy answer, and there's a card in the base game called the Extended or Expanded Crew Quarters. And what the Expanded Crew Quarters lets you do is have a second crew member. And so that's a really cool concept. Each crew member has a different power, so it'd be fantastic to be able to have 2 of them. But the problem is the Expanded Crew Quarters works differently than other cards in the game. And so it gets confusing on how you're supposed to use it. For example, you equip that expanded crew quarters, and then you hire another crew member. it's not obvious where that other crew member goes. And so you might set it off to the side, but now there's only 2 things in the upgrades row. And so it's like, what do you do now? Or when you replace the expanded crew quarters with something else, now the expanded crew quarters and the extra crew member go over to the upgrades row. Now there's 4 things, and so it's confusing. What do you do now? So it's caused Mike Lee, our rules editor, some headaches. And so if I could change one thing about the game, it would be that.
And to kind of bring it back to Spaceship, because I do want to mention this, going back to what you said about you're living a fairly mundane life in this like bizarre universe. But one of the things that I love about Spaceship is that it is this like sci-fi adventure game, but you're not blasting down enemies. Like, you're just trying to survive. Like, you're not fighting. You're not like, it's not a game, there's a lot of sci-fi impulses that lead you to, okay, now I'm in a ship. This ship has cool lasers, and it's gonna, it's like you're not terrorizing your enemies.
It's just the setting. Yeah, it's really just the setting and the story surrounding it, which is where I said to Lucas, we need to make fantasy Spaceship at one point, because it's this, like traditional fantasy, not like sci-fi fantasy, because it's the same thing. It's cool stories happening around you while you're just adventuring or whatever.
Yeah. But again, even there, it's like there's 1,001 fantasy-themed dungeon crawlers.
Yes.
You go in, you get bigger swords and fight the boss, and this is like not that. Like, you are fighting a boss, but it doesn't feel like that. It has this sort of just off-kilter twist that I think really resonates with people.
Yeah.
There's just so few games in the Button Shy catalog that have that, like, and
I think, if I'm correct, it was like all Lucas. Like, I think, did you do some editing on Spaceship?
No, Spaceship was before my time.
So I don't remember. I think actually Mike Lee did a little bit of editing on the flavor, but it was mostly like technical to make things match. I removed a few words and just changed a few things around, but it was very much, the story came from Lucas.
Yeah.
The setting, the story, we kind of set it in what we called our Pocket Universe, which was just some existing planets from other games, existing characters from other games and things like that. But it all came from him. Like, it was very much like Lucas's vision put to cards. Very much.
Well, and he did the same thing with Fantasy Form. And he and I have had a couple conversations because I did work on that one. And it's like, so much of what he put in there was so good already that it's like, how can I say this again? Take something great and make it slightly shorter. There wasn't much.
I think if he was I don't know if he can illustrate or not, but if he could illustrate, I think he'd be on that same line as like those game designers that can illustrate and can make great games, and kind of, it's like the all-in-one package, and they can self-publish and everything. If he, just Lucas, if you're listening, if you can illustrate, you've got that dream thing that like all of us designers want, where you can write well, design well, illustrate, and then just kind of let your vision out there to people.
Yeah. I mean, even to just hire an artist, if you're bringing 2/3 of the package already, it's just one less person you need,
It's great.
But yeah, Lucas is phenomenal designer, and I'm always curious and excited to see what he's up to next.
He's also the happiest person I've ever met.
Oh, he's just a wonderful, lovely man.
Thrilled.
Yeah.
Like, just so fun to be around, and our time is always super brief, but it's just fun to even chat and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that comes through in the game that, even though the game can be like daunting and overwhelming, there is sort of like pluckiness to it of like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to, sail around.
It's difficult but never dark is probably a good description of
yeah,
it.
that's really great. Difficult,
back to
but
these
never
4 to 5 word.
Yeah.
But difficult but never dark. Like, it doesn't feel dark ever.
Yeah.
Like, bad things happen.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like,
It's not The Walking Dead. It's not,
exactly.
It's not even like Star Wars or something. It just doesn't feel even that dark. There's this kind of like, again, plucky optimism that just kind of shines through of like, all right, yes, my ship did blow up that time, but this next time will be different. That sort of like resoluteness in the face of an uncaring world is like, I don't know, it speaks to me. It's a game that I think is super cool, and I remember the first time I played it, I was like, oh, this is really cool. It was just like
but that's because you didn't lose on your first turn.
That's true. Well, I did lose, but not on the first turn.
Exactly.
I lost very badly, probably on turn 2. But yeah, it's just a great game, and I think a real credit to Lucas to make something like this. If this is the first game that somebody has played by Button Shy, what game do you hand them next? Where did you go from here?
I know 100%.
Yeah, I honestly feel like we're going to have the same answer.
You want to say it at the same time?
Well, no, because what if we don't? Then I'm going to be embarrassed.
Ugly Griffin in.
Oh wow! See, we wouldn't have lined up at all. Ugly Griffin in.
100%.
Explain this. Explain.
It's also solo.
Okay.
But the entire game is the story of what's happening between these characters. Every little every time they move, they've got this flavorful blurb of this person is strong, so they pick up everything, throw it out of the inn, and drag everything along with it. Whatever. Everything has that little narrative element to where when it's done, you feel like you've experienced this little story-ish game that is not a story-ish game.
Yeah.
With it also being solo, also manipulating a lot of things, moving them around. I think they share a lot more in common than you'd realize.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even. It wasn't even on my radar to tell you the truth. That's so fascinating. But you're 100% right. And the stories that people get out of Ugly Griffin Inn are exactly the same kind of stories that you get. This sense of like, oh man, everything was going so well.
Well, that's
and then,
it. Like,
this goblin showed up and everything fell apart.
You're not losing on the first turn just the way Ugly Griffin Inn, you have to lose so many people to lose the game.
Yeah.
So you are losing on the first turn already.
Yes.
Because it's so difficult.
Yeah.
And, that has those swingy, like, comebacks as well.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, this is just over. It's just, I'm done.
Yeah.
So what's your game?
So mine was going to be Twin Stars.
Oh, interesting.
Because it's sci-fi and it's so narrative. Twin Stars is, in my opinion, one of the best games that Button Shy ever made. It is also one of the most difficult to approach games. Talk about rough edges, right? Yeah. But what I love about Twin Stars is if you approach it as a story, if you approach it from a narrative standpoint, the entire game makes sense. Every scenario makes sense.
That's one where it's like, if you don't know the rules, just do what you think.
Just do what you think.
It's hard to tell that to like a non-designer.
Yeah.
It's just a completely different level of thing. But it's just like, it's solo. Whatever you think is right. If you feel like it should be a little more difficult, go with the harder one. If you feel like it should be easier, go with the easier. But it's all out there. The whole thing was built, at least me and Mike Mullins designed it, and everything I built was as close to theme first as you could ever get.
Yes.
Where it's just like, this one is like, ships are coming at you and you need to do your little center radar guns and everything. It was just like all theme first. So whatever the theme goes should guide your, your rules questions for our lack of space to make a game that was way bigger than it should have been in that wallet.
Yeah, well, I think that's what's, again, it's like it's overstuffed in the same way as SpaceShipped is, of like it's that's overstuffed really cool. And yet it feels right. It just feels like, oh man, there's so much here. I could make 10 movies out of this. You know,
I mean, that's where that came from. That's exactly where the inspiration for that came from.
And to me, like, those two games are like brother and sister. Like, you know, they're right next to each other. Like,
the real interesting thing is we're bringing Twin Stars back, but not making better rules. So we are going to revisit that whole thing that we try not to revisit. And some people are going to be mad, but that's a reprint. What can I do? It's not a 2.0. It's a reprint.
I mean, it's I think one of the wooliest games that you have.
It's going to be fun times with getting that back out there. It's old school button shy.
It is. I mean, and I think it really is like I say, I think it's one of the best that Button Shy has ever released, at least the ones I've played.
Thank you.
You know, it hits everything that I want and everything that I get out of SpaceShipped. Like, it's the same, you know, it's a little bit more space opera, right?
Yeah.
It's a little heavier on that. But it's, you know, same universe, same vibe, but with this hugely, like, even more narrative heavy package. And I was already happy with the narrative level in SpaceShipped. Like, you know, so when I got to Twin Stars, I was just like, whoa, you know, it's like next level. Yeah. But, and again, also like a really great churn. Like, it's really just fun to like roll the dice, move the pieces, roll the dice, move the pieces, you know, that like the physical act of playing it is fun to me. In the same way that SpaceShipped is, of like, oh, let's move the row and see what's coming next. It's the same kind of excitement to be moving pieces, moving stuff around. So fascinating, though. I really I thought we were on the same page 100%.
I thought we were too, and I'm glad we weren't because it was more interesting. But
yeah,
I thought we were 100% on the same.
Yeah, when you said Ugly Griffin Inn, I was like, what? Like, now that you explained it, like, it makes perfect sense. But in that moment, I was just like, does he even know how Ugly Griffin Inn is played?
Has he played Ugly Griffin Inn?
Yeah,
I have, and I've lost.
Yeah, that is one I have never won, and it just I don't know. That one does not click for me in any way.
I can't wait to talk about it.
It's really just fun. It's just one it doesn't. My brain can't handle it, and it always turns into a mess. Again, it's like I won't lose turn 1, but turn 2 is rough. You know, it's just kind of like that for me. So yeah, we'll have to talk about that one in a future episode. But but for now, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
See ya.